Ndị Igbo kwen yo kwen yo kwezuon anyị ga-adị o. Aizo hey Aizo hey Izo kamemi emi
In January 1914, Britain unilaterally created the modern state of Nigeria by uniting two British protectorates in West Africa, one in the Muslim north of Nigeria, one in the mainly Christian south. Using the BBC archive, Alex Last looks back at a defining moment in Nigerian history.
Many people like myself, who belong to an earlier generation of Nigerians, cannot help feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the prodigious changes which our country has undergone in just a little over half a century.
The voice of Ernest Ikoli, the late Nigerian nationalist and journalist who was born in 1893.
We should not forget that the Nigeria we see on the map today as one country was not always so. It was not a country, but a mere geographical expression.
When Ernest Ikoli was a child, Nigeria was being shaped by British imperial ambition. It had already led to the creation of a colony at Lagos and a British protectorate declared over much of what is now southern Nigeria. Then in 1900, a veteran of Britain's colonial wars, Sir Frederick Lugard, was sent to Nigeria to extend British control northwards to the Muslim Emirates which made up the vast Sokoto Caliphate, one of the largest pre-colonial African empires. In 1943, just a few years before his death, Lord Lugard himself was recorded in a rare interview with the BBC.
Mr. Joseph Chamberlain, when Colonial Secretary, decided that the British government should cancel the Niger Company's charter and assume direct control. I was appointed to this task as Governor of Northern Nigeria on January the 1st, 1900.
The basic issue was that Britain did not want France to get hold of this territory. It wanted to make sure it had it for itself.
John Smith is a former Nigerian colonial officer and writer.
Lugard, who was a soldier essentially and a child of empire, he was born in India after all, he was given the mission to actually try and subdue the north and make them subject to Britain as a protectorate.
I found that the greater part of the country was under Muslim rulers who annually raided the pagan tribes for slaves with armies of horsemen said to number several thousand. I sent a letter to Sultan of Sokoto, courteously worded, but insisting that this slave trade raiding must cease. He replied curtly that between us there was only war. I had at my disposal a small native force which I had been instructed to raise in order to check French aggression, for at that time our relations with the French were very strained. The Muslims were defeated and the raiding was stopped.
A protectorate was declared over what is now northern Nigeria, but even under British colonial rule, north and south remained separate entities. With little infrastructure or transport, the two were worlds apart, as Ernest Ikoli remembered.
There were no railways, no roads, no motor cars, and of course no aeroplanes. To go from Lagos to Kano was like going to the end of the world. Perhaps many of you have heard of the story of the prosperous Lagos merchant who, in 1903, imported a motor car, but had to ship it back to England because there were no roads on which to run it.
In the Northern Protectorate, there was also a huge difference in administration. When Lugard had defeated the Northern Emirates, he had a problem. He had very few men to impose British control, and Britain was not going to supply more. By this stage, London wanted empire on the cheap. So Lugard adopted an idea from British India and promoted the policy of indirect rule, using the existing traditional leaders to govern under British control. The structured political world of northern Nigeria's old emirates seemed to fit the bill.
It had a population of 7 million in an area of nearly 300,000 square miles, and the total British military and civil establishment in 1908 was 399. The only practical way you could run the country was through the existing institutions. It worked very well initially in the far north, and Lugard was excited about it, and it became the creed.
But there was opposition too, not least in the southeast, where the British created chiefs where there had been none, so they could extend their policy of indirect rule through local leaders. But despite the unification, British colonial officials continued to rule the constituent parts as virtual separate territories. They barely even spoke to each other, as one colonial officer's wife recalled when she described her voyage on the ship out to Nigeria.
Officials going to northern Nigeria and those going to southern Nigeria looked upon each other with equal contempt, I think. We never spoke to each other.
But the internal separation had serious consequences. The South remained exposed to Christianity and took to Western education, while the North remained independently Islamic. 100 years on from unification, the fault lines still remain.
Please support Indigenous People of Biafra campaign for self-determination. We urgently need funds to do the following: to upgrade Voice of Biafra BVI Channel 1 from internet TV and radio broadcast to world-class satellite TV and radio station. Fund is needed to finance our suit for self-determination currently at Federal High Court of wher, as we are set to take the suit to International Court of Justice through our Legal and Human Rights Department, the Human Rights Initiative. Fund is also needed to cover travel expense for our diplomatic missions to United Nations, African Union, European Union, and as well individual countries that are still sympathetic with our cause, while scouting for countries that will support this noble cause. Also, fund is needed to continue our women and youth empowerment program and as well community services. All these are capital intensive. 50 million naira is urgently needed to proceed. Our ideology hinges on applying the following: diplomacy, mass media, court process, both local and international, political means, and every other legitimate means of pursuing our right for self-determination in Nigeria and among international community. We say no to war in Biafran land, Africa, and the world at large. We appeal to you as a concerned Biafran, sympathizer, or even as a philanthropic bystander to assist our noble cause. We assure your donations shall be kept confidential unless you instruct otherwise. We count on your donation, without which we cannot proceed. You can donate through our finance department, Omo Afra Indigenous Development Association. It is a body corporate with registered trustees you can really trust, under the customary government of Indigenous People of Biafra, as administered by the Supreme Council of Elders. The account name is Omo Afra Indigenous Development Association. Account number is 1771 6411 58. The bank is Sky Bank PLC. You can also donate through our PayPal link via our website www.ipobgovernment.org. For further inquiries, please call 080-3710-4017 or 080-3624-7812. Please add +234 if you are outside Nigeria. Yes, we can. Yes, we can be free. In Biafra, Africa shall rise again with the rising sun. Voice of Biafra, BVI Channel 1, giving Biafra a voice.
Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa.
Ndị Igbo kwenu ya, kwenu ya, kwezuonu, anyị ga-adị o. Aizo, hey, Aizo, hey, Izo kamemi, emi.